What if Abraham, the father of faith, was once studying the stars? The Bible tells us Abraham came from Ur of the Chaldeans. But later Jewish traditions began asking a fascinating question. What was Abraham doing before God called him? Ancient writers started connecting Abraham with astronomy, star observation, and the wisdom of the Chaldeans. Some even claimed Abraham studied the heavens before turning to the worship of one God. Could Abraham have been an astronomer before becoming the father of monotheism? And if so, why isn't this story found directly in Genesis? Today, we uncover the forgotten tradition of Abraham the Star Watcher. The book of Genesis gives surprisingly little detail about Abraham's early life. We learn he came from Ur of the Chaldeans, his family traveled to Haran, and later God called him. But there is something interesting. In Joshua chapter 24 verse 2, we read, "Your fathers served other gods." This means Abraham grew up in a household connected with polytheistic worship. Genesis never explains how Abraham moved from that environment to faith in one God. For later Jewish thinkers, this became a mystery. How did the greatest patriarch emerge from a world filled with idols? The silence in Genesis created a gap, and later traditions began filling it. The key detail was one phrase, Ur of the Chaldeans. Originally, this was simply geography. But centuries later, the word Chaldean gained another meaning. In Greek and Aramaic culture, Chaldeans became associated with astronomy, star observation, and celestial knowledge. People began asking, if Abraham came from the Chaldeans, was he connected to their astronomical traditions? A simple place name suddenly became something larger. Abraham was no longer only the man who left Ur. He became Abraham the observer of the heavens. The earliest major version appears in the ancient Jewish work called Book of Jubilees. This text expands Genesis and adds details not found in the Bible. Here, Abraham sits outside at night, watching the stars, observing the skies, trying to understand the future and the coming rains. Then suddenly, Abraham reaches a realization. The stars do not control destiny. God does. The text describes Abraham concluding, "The moon, the sun, the constellations, all remain under God's authority." This was revolutionary. The story presents Abraham as someone who knew the stars, yet rejected their power. Centuries later, Philo of Alexandria retold the story differently. For Philo, Abraham's journey was not merely religious. It was philosophical. Philo imagined Abraham studying Chaldean wisdom for years, then suddenly awakening, as if opening his eyes after darkness. Abraham looked beyond the stars, beyond the heavens, and realized there must be a higher ruler governing all things. For Philo, the stars were not the destination. They were signs pointing toward God. Abraham became the first philosopher of monotheism. The idea continued spreading. Around the 2nd century, Clement of Alexandria connected Abraham with ancient Greek traditions. He even interpreted old poetic writings as references to Abraham himself. In these traditions, Abraham appears as a wise Chaldean, someone who understood the motions of the heavens. The image of Abraham the astronomer had now entered Jewish and Christian thought. Later rabbinic tradition transformed the story again. In Genesis rabbis reflected on Genesis chapter 15. God tells Abraham, "Look toward heaven and count the stars." But the rabbis imagined something extraordinary. God lifting Abraham above the heavens, above the constellations, above fate itself. Then comes the powerful declaration, "You are a prophet, not an astrologer." The meaning was clear. The stars do not rule Abraham. God does. Abraham stands above them. Did Abraham really study astronomy? Genesis never directly says so. But later traditions imagined exactly that. From Jubilees, to Philo, to Christian writers, to rabbinic teachers, a single phrase, Ur of the Chaldeans, grew into one of the most fascinating forgotten traditions in biblical history. Abraham the observer of stars, Abraham the seeker, Abraham the man who looked at heaven, and found the Creator beyond it.